Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture 2 of the Java tutorial series Essential for Selenium, right? So in this lecture we're gonna study about data types. There are basically two types of data types available in Java. One is primitive and one is non-primitive. So what are these data types we're gonna discuss? I'll really quick create a new project and give it a name as Java lecture 2. So here I'll create a new class and give it a name as data types, right, and I'll check this main method over here. Alright, so firstly we're going to see about primitive data types. What are primitive data types? If I can write int I can write float f, and there is another called long L and boolean b and char c, and that's a string s. So all these are data types. These we called as primitive data types because these are part of the language that we are using. So if we take a look at primitive data types are defined by the programming language itself, right? So int basically, if I use the int data type, int itself gonna refer to the integer value. We're gonna store integer value inside this int data type. Similarly, float will gonna store float value, long will gonna store long value, char will gonna store character values, and string will gonna store string values. String is it is also a class in Java, right? So we're going to talk about these data types, how we're going to store values and what all values can be stored inside it. So if I talk about int, I can store value, let's say 1 2 3 4. Any integer value can be stored inside int data type, right? Float, generally it stores decimal values. So if we have value like 1.234, right? So float generally store decimal values. With float, we need to suffix f. Whenever whenever we are using float, we need to suffix it with f. And then if we talk about long also stores the value something like this, 1 2 3 4 5 6. So let's say if we talk about integer, long also stores integer values, right? But with integer, if I write 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0, right, up to 10 values, 10 digit it is storing. If I just write one more over here, you can see it will gonna throw an error, right? So it is saying that this int is out of range, right? Because int stores values up till here only, right? So what we need to do, if we have long integer values, then we're going to store it over here, 6 7 8 9 10 1, right? And how long we're going to store it? We're going to suffix l at the end and it will going to store this value. So we can have long values up till any character over here, right? Similarly, there is one more data type, that is double. Now what sort of values double will gonna store? Double will gonna store values that are, so double is like float only, but the only difference is that a double contains longer values after decimal, so we can have longer values over here, right? Whereas if you talk about this float, it cannot store if the values goes more longer. I mean, we need to put f over here, but with double there is nothing like that, right? We can have values in double like this, right? So this is the only difference in double and float, right? And then we talk about a data type, that is boolean. Now what sort of values boolean will gonna store? Boolean only stores values that result in true or false, right? Either a condition is true or a condition is false, right? So it generally stores value either true or false, right? So this is how Boolean will gonna store value. Character will gonna store only single character. We can write A over here. It only stores a single character. If there are more than one character, then it will not gonna store it because these sort of values will gonna be stored inside a string variable. So in a string, I can write complete sentence like this is Java tutorial, right? So these are all data types, and these are the major data types which we gonna use a lot while learning Java, and our entire Java is dependent on all these data types, right? So these are basically primitive data types because these are defined by the programming language itself. Now if I write over here, if I write the class that we have created over here, that is a test class, right? This is also a variable, and if I write it like this, test t, right? Now this test, just second, it's asking me to, okay, let me save it. Alright, I cannot directly call test from here because this test is inside a different project, and now we are inside a different project, right? So what I can do, let's say if I create an object of this class, I'll say data type D. Now this we call as okay, D I've already used. See, we cannot use the same variable again, otherwise it will gonna say that this is a duplicate local variable, right? So I'll say like this, right? Now this is also a data type for this variable, right? But this is a non-primitive data type. So if we take a look over here, so non-primitive data types are defined by programmers, right? So in this, the data type of a variable is the class whose object it is going to refer, right? So where you can see over here where test is the data type of T. So this is the difference in primitive and non-primitive data types, and these are the things we're going to use entirely in our Java, and whenever we're going to write Selenium code, so that will be purely based on these Java concepts. Now when we are assigning any value to any data type or any variable, then we are actually doing initialization. So this we call as initialization, and when we write int I or float f, this means that we are actually doing declaration, right? So if you take a look over here, if I go to the next slide, so declaration and initialization of primitive data types. So just with long and with float type of data types, we suffix L and F. Otherwise, it will be treated, if we don't write L, if we don't suffix L with the long values, then the compiler will gonna treat it as a integer, right? And this is how like we're gonna do the declaration and initialization of all these primitive variables, right? Let's take a look at the next thing. Next is Java string, right? Now string in Java, string is a class, right? It is not a data type, right? So it can be called as a class, it can be declared over here as a class only. So I can write string s equal to, and I can assign some value, some I've already taken s, so I can write xyz, anything I can, a variable could be anything, right? So I can write some string characters over here, right? Now in Java, string, the s of string should always be capital. If I make it small, then it will not gonna accept it, because Java is a case sensitive language, right? Now to know what all things will be in capitals and what all things will be in small letters, right? There is a standard, a common standard which we gonna follow throughout the course, that we also call as camel casing, right? So what I'll do, I'll go to my Java lectures over here. All right, and I'll just open the introduction part so that I'll first make you familiar with what camel casing is. So camel casing is, let's say if you are working as a professional programmer, right? So how actually you're gonna code it, what are the coding standards that you're gonna follow, right? So that is what defined, like how you're gonna declare, how you're gonna create a class, and will it follow like uppercase or a lowercase, how everything will be formed, right? So all these things will be defined with this camel casing, right? So this will really going to help you a lot in case you're working professionally, in case you are doing some coding, in case you are working on automation project as well, and if you are writing Java code. So these things will gonna help a lot. So let's understand more about camel casing. Let's say I go back to the Eclipse, and let's say if I write something like int and I declare variables, let's say Batman begins, right? So compiler will not gonna accept it, right? Because there is a space in between this variable. So if I remove the space, it does accepts it, but the readability, like it's become less readable, right? So if it comes like all of a sudden it comes in front of you, you might not be able to read it. If still you are able to read it, because you know that this is these are two words, and we have formed a single word using this Batman begins, right? What if I write and the dark, let's say night, right? So now this is form of three words, right? So it is now less readable, again less readable than we were reading these two words. Now what if a variable something like the dark night rises, right? So there are four words right now, right? Let me correct the spelling. All right. So there are four words. So the longer the variable like goes on, the longer it will be less readable, right? So that is why, I mean, we follow the concept of camel casing over here. So so what we're gonna do to make it more readable, I can do one thing. I can after every word I can write underscore, right? Then it will be more readable. Right now we are able to understand that these are like four words. But to do this, I have actually like increased three more words, right? Underscore is also treated as an individual word, right? So there are some special cases which we're going to talk about where these underscores will be used. But here we are not going to use underscore. We're gonna follow the camel casing concept, and that says that in integer, the integer always starts with a small letter, and then after wherever the first word ends, the next letter would be of the second word should be capital, and then for the third should be capital. So how many words will there be? All of them will start from a capital letter. Now this will be more readable, right? Over here, if I write Batman begins, if I write the dark night, right? So this is more readable now, right? And this is what we call as camel casing, right? You can see it form up like the same thing that you see over here with a camel, right? It forms up a structure of camel, right? So based on this, some guys like who have created Java, they have also created some conventions, let's say there are some coding standards, I mean, which they have form up, and which they say that if everyone in the world follows the same coding standard, then the code will be more readable. And if a new person is reading that code, he should be able to get what exactly is written inside that code if he is using the same naming conventions. So these are some naming standards that we're going to follow. So the very first rule is that a class should always start with a capital letter, right? And then it accepts the camel casing, right? Like this. If I create a class way to automation, then the first letter should be capital, and then it can be camel casing, right? So these are not mandatory, right? It's not mandatory that you should always keep the class with a capital letter. If you write it with small letter as well, you will gonna create a class, right? It doesn't mean that with small letters you cannot create a class. But this is a standard practice that is being followed by everyone, by a professional who is actually writing Java code, right? This is what followed by almost everyone, right? Similarly, if we talk about interfaces, right, interfaces should also be capital, then camel casing, and the name should represent adjectives, right, like runnable, serializable, action listener, right? Over here, in class it should represent the noun, right? So noun could be account, dog, way to automation, right? So the other rule of class and interface is that the class is always when we create a class, when you read the Java document of any library, you will find that a class is always in a normal font, whereas an interface you will see it in an italic font. So you should be able to come to know that this is an interface, or this is a class, right? Similarly, if we talk about methods, right, generally people call them as functions. So let's say if you have ever worked on C++ or ASP or Visual Basic, you call these things as functions, but in Java we call them as methods, right? So a method should always start from a small letter, and then it follows the camel casing, right? And the name should represent a verb noun pair. So it could be, let's say, it should tell what that method is doing, right? So get result could be a method, do calculation could be a method, right? So this is a naming convention that we're going to follow for the method. And then for variable, the variable that we just created, we have seen. So variable should also start from a small letter and then camel casing, right? And it should be meaningful to a word that we have written. Let's say we are calculating the width of a button, right? So the variable should be button width. So it's telling that what this like variable will gonna hold, which value this variable will gonna hold, right? Account balance, so it will gonna hold the account balance, right? Similarly, we talk about constants. So constants, all characters should be in uppercase, right? If you are declaring any constant, then all the characters in constant should be uppercase, and each character should be separated by a underscore. So here is where we're going to use underscore. So these are the standard practice, right? If you see, if I show you one of the Java docs, let's say if I go to seleniumhq.org, and here if I go to downloads, and I'll show you the Java docs over here. So over here you can see with all these classes, they are following the same practice, right? A class always starts from a capital letter, right? So the thing that is in like italics, capabilities, right? So this is basically an interface. If I click on a normal font check, this is basically a class, right? So these are the common standards followed everywhere. Every Java document you're gonna read, you're gonna find these standard practices only, right? So we're gonna follow the same camel casing throughout the code throughout the examples that we're gonna use. Now, if we talk about like a string over here, right? We said that string is a class, right? So there is a Java document associated to a string class as well. If I search for string class Java doc, right, it will take me to this, and let's see if this is the all right. So this is basically, you can see a string is a class, right? And there are constructors, methods associated to this class, and you can see all the methods are starting with the small letters, right? All methods starts from a small letter, and class always starts from a capital letter. Over here as well, a class, all the classes you can see, all of them are starting with a capital letter. There is nothing you're gonna see in the small letter, right? And if you see the methods inside these classes, you're gonna find all the methods start from a small letter, right? A method starts from a small letter, right?